Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Shit Moms Won't Say. My guest tonight is the doula of all veteran doulas in North Carolina, and I am lying to you about it being tonight because of her insane schedule. We are literally recording in broad daylight, so we're going to deal with that. She is also the host of Birth Story Podcast, and she is the author of an incredible book called Birth Story, a pregnancy guide and journal. Which, in my very humble and very smart opinion, should become the next What to Expect When You're Expecting, because that book is trash. Mom of two, Miss Heidi Snyderburn, welcome to my show.
Hey, Jess, thanks so much. I do also hope it becomes the next big seller.
It will, just from being on my, forget it. From being here today, it's done. Nobody's even going to remember. What's her name? The chick, I don't know. The chick that wore the yellow shirt and the black bra with the What to Expect. And you're like, oh my God, change your shirt. Something Merc.
Heidi. Her name's
Heidi. She's also Heidi. So that's
also Heidi.
That's an easy replacement then.
Yeah, the new Heidi.
The new
Here
Heidi.
we are.
The new and improved Heidi. Well, I love that. So we just did a little fake out because Heidi and I have been trying to get recording for the last half hour, and because of technical bullshit, she and I are both like, do we do this now? Do we not do it now? So when I was like, welcome to my show, that is not the first time I said that to her. So I appreciate you going and pretending like it was. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And before we get into Big Mom 3, you told me something before we started recording that made me laugh, is that you are such a crazy editor with your show that sometimes you're like, I can't even get it up. And me, because what I said to you was like, Heidi, listen, I really don't like to edit. I'm very lazy about it. If something comes out, I will, but I don't want to. And you are the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, I cut out every breath.
If I cut out every or breath, we would have no show. We would have, that's my toxic trait, is being so all right, we're very different. That's okay. I like having different people on my show. So let's get into the Big Mom 3. First question of Big Mom 3. Did you always know you wanted to be a mom?
Okay. So no, I did not think that I wanted to be a mom. So part of my journey into becoming a doula was that I helped my mom deliver one of my siblings on the bathroom floor when I was in middle school, and she was having a miscarriage. And I feel like that was just very scary and traumatic. And that was my first, kind of inauguration into being a doula, being about learning about birth. And I didn't like it at all. I also grew up in a household. Side note, we'll probably get into this, but I have another podcast called Thanks, It's the Trauma.
Yes. Yeah,
it's about some unique traumas. And so I feel like I grew up with a good amount of neglect. And so parenting wasn't something that was necessarily modeled well for me. And it definitely wasn't something that felt natural. So definitely was not on the mom track. Went actually to MBA school right out of college. I was the youngest person to attend the MBA program where I went, and don't recommend that, but I just was on this, I'm going to make tons of money. I want to be the CEO of a company. I want to run, and I never thought run my own business, which is funny because it's come full circle, right? But
yeah.
I was totally I'm not going to be a mom. I just want to run a company. I can't be bothered with any of that, and never saw myself being a mom. So I don't know, I was 25-ish when my sister gave birth, and I was her doula. And I think when I met my nephew, it was just different than meeting someone else's baby.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is
ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, and his name's Alessandro. And when I met Alessandro, everything kind of changed for me. And I knew for sure that I wanted to be a mom, and then very quickly became very sad that I wasn't a mom for many, many years. Yeah.
Well, so something you said, and this comes up on the show a lot, is the idea of parenting, because of or in spite. So me, we probably grew up in similar environments. I was not raised in an environment where I was oh, this is model parenting. This is what moms do. That none of that. So I always I feel like I parent in spite. Anytime I'm faced with something, I'm what is the exact opposite that would have happened when I was a child. And like, do you feel like you parent in spite?
Yes, absolutely. But even funnier now is that my mom lives with me to help me raise my children. And so
Nice.
I will say she was a young teen mom, right? And
Yeah.
so many 40 something years have gone by. So now she's not like this young teen mom anymore.
Sure.
And so she's actually a pretty evolved grandmother. And she was never a bad mom. She was just young, you know? And
Oh,
so
interesting.
now it's interesting to see that balance though, because there's at least 3 times a day where she starts to say something to my kids and I say, "Mom, stop, stop." And or I give her a look and I like say, "Cut it off
Mhm. It's not
now,"
how we
you
do it
know?
here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so we do have very different perspectives on how to parent. Yeah.
That's cool though, that like you're at a point and like, you literally have another podcast about like trauma that you're able to like work through it and now have this nice relationship, whether it's always like on the same playing field or not, like that you can work through that. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, we do our best.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a little story about an
Of
example
course. Of
of
course.
so today it's like fresh, right? So
Okay.
we do a version of open gender parenting or gender open parenting. There's all different gender creative parenting. There's all different terms, right?
Yeah.
Meaning my children are biologically their sex is male and they have dresses in their closet and bows and makeup and girl toys and boy toys. If we gender everything, right?
Girl
Like if we're like,
toys,
this
boy
is like air
toys.
quote, like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know. So they have this equal opportunity to kind of just express themselves. So today, Max, my oldest, who's in kindergarten, decided, and we do use male pronouns with them though.
Sure.
So Max was like, I set it out before school last night and was like, I want you to do pigtails with these 2 bows. And they were 2 different bows.
Cute.
And I was like, okay, fine, great, whatever. Well, my mom's like overhearing this conversation and she's like, oh no, you just need to discourage that. He doesn't need to go to school. Like, like with that, maybe that's something we do at home. Like, so it's just really funny because it's like, stop. No, I'm the parent. So
Right.
I often joke that I am the parent of both my parent and also my children.
Yeah, no, and that's really cool. We're going to talk about like obviously there's been some things that have happened in your life that I'm sure have impacted that type of decision and that type of parenting and sort of open gender parenting. And it's something like I'm really curious about. Like we try to make sure that my daughter will always have the freedom and the like comfort of being able to come to us and say like I feel however. And I think it's really cool. It's not something we're doing, and I like love to hear about it because I think it's so interesting. Before we do that, we have two more. We have 2 more Big Mom 3
Okay,
questions.
got it.
The second question of the Big Mom 3. What is the like shittiest or most backhanded piece of advice or like comment you've ever gotten from another mother or parent?
Well, this is very controversial and I understand that.
Mhm.
Okay.
I already know your answer, so I'm nodding. Yes.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So for my family, we chose an alternate vaccination schedule. For one of my children, that means no vaccinations. My youngest, Jagger, has cerebral palsy. He had a brain injury and he's only 5 years old. So we just haven't been comfortable while he has been working on processing things like emotion, language, learning how to physically work his left, listen to me, left, right leg and right arm. You know, I'm not comfortable introducing different chemicals into his body. That goes very far, goes into the diet that he eats and all of these kinds of things. So are on a very, very, very delayed, very alternate to no vaccine schedule. And it was really difficult for me because there have been lots of backhanded comments about that because and we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Right. Yeah, your timing of like,
another
yeah, it's a
new,
weird time to be like, I
yeah,
have to go vaccinate my kids. Yeah.
right. Okay. And so this is like many years before the pandemic and all of this. But there was just a lot of backhanded comments. And one of them I will never forget was just like hurt me to the core because she was like, don't worry, I'll vaccinate my kids so you don't have to vaccinate yours. And it was just like, ugh.
You
And
know
I'm
what
like,
it is?
don't worry.
You're
I'll
not
raise the
like,
kid with cerebral palsy while you raise
right.
your healthy kid,
Well,
you
that's
know?
what it is. Like we are like, we're big believers in vaccines. I know like you're a believer in science. Like you're not, to my understanding anyway, and correct me if I'm wrong, like you're not like a crazy anti-vaxxer. You're
No,
like,
not at
hey,
all.
I have this kid with a developmental delay. You know, some type, there's a delay, and like I'm waiting because of that. And I feel like that plays a lot into like the COVID vaccine right now. Like we were talking about this yesterday. We were at our friend's house for a barbecue because, and Heidi will agree, vaccines do work when they're like appropriate. So we're able to be around people,
Yeah.
right? We were talking about this like for young girls, like, and I know there's really no science behind the like COVID vaccine and like periods and fertility yet. Like they're really not saying that there's a correlation. They don't know. But we were talking about like if Lily was a little bit older, would we vaccinate her because like she doesn't have her period yet? You know, or like, would you wait? And I think that that type of stuff is not, that's not crazy. You know, like that's a personal choice. Like your son has cerebral palsy. There is a reason why you are choosing to not vaccinate at this point. It's a little different.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way we stand on it is more like what I do with my body or what my children do with their body is no one else's business, right?
Sure.
Like just I like anything else, like, you know, I don't tell anyone it's their right or not right to have an abortion or to be circumcised or like to eat processed foods. Like each person gets to make an individual choice for their own body. And, you know, so I'm pretty strong on that, but as
Yeah.
you and your wife probably know, I'm also very into science. I'm an evidence-based doula. And so I take all of the science and evidence and then I make informed choices for my children's bodies. So
Yes.
that comment just kind of crushed me.
That's an awful comment. And just so everyone knows, the reason why Heidi and I are connected and why she will say, like, your wife probably knows about me. Heidi is my wife's mentor. My wife interns for Heidi because she's a doula, and that's how we've sort of connected. So I'm going into this interview knowing a lot about Heidi and trying to pretend that I don't. So that's how this is going.
That's okay, Jess, because I don't know a lot about you. So
perfect. And no one does. I'm like this great mystery, and that's how I would like to remain in society. That's not true at all. Within 2 seconds, people meet me. I'm like, you want to hear about my childhood? So yeah, not at all. You'll get to know me real fast. But I think that that's a legitimate thing. I think that's really cool. And I am definitely the type of person to be like, what do you mean you don't vaccinate your kids? In that situation, you won't get that from me. I totally get that. And that woman can go fuck herself. Okay. Big mom question number 3. What is a skill or superpower you had before becoming a mom that you think has really helped you as a mom?
Yeah. My biggest like mom superpower is my ability to negotiate with them. Like I spent 20 years in sales. At the core of who I am, like my dad's a lawyer. I am, I'm the lawyer, non-lawyer, right? Like I'm the lawyer who did not go to law school. And I have this ability to just talk them into anything that I need them to do or say or want. And then they think it's their idea at the end of it.
That's
And so
sales.
yeah, total sales. I mean, probably a little sleazy, but
it's manipulative. Listen, I have it too. And you either like have it or you don't. Like you, and if you have it, you can really pretty much convince anyone to do anything that you want them to do.
I mean, it's a very powerful skill in parenting.
Yeah.
Though,
it's a good skill set, and it's a good skill set for a parent.
Yeah.
Really good skill set for a parent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. And just doing level 6, I know the answer, but like your kids are, give me the ages so we kind of know where you're coming from.
So the youngest Jagger, he's 5. He'll be 6 at the end of this summer. And then my oldest Max is 7, and they are 15 months apart.
Love it. Do they like get along at 15 months apart, or are they like?
I mean, like both. I mean, they're best friends and they wrestle and fight all day. Yeah.
It works. They'll either outgrow it or it'll get worse. We'll see. I don't know. Okay, so let's jump to a couple other things, because you have a really interesting life, and you've had a lot of cool things go on, like sort of outside of your doula career. And something that when I first heard this, I was like, I need to understand like how you manage this for your children. Is your partner came out as trans identifying. What was it, a couple of years ago is when that happened?
About 2.5 years ago. Yeah.
About 2.5 years ago. So, I mean, I'm sure the impact was different as a mother, is different as a wife, is different as a friend, and I'd love to hear a little bit how that worked in terms of explaining it to your children and explaining, or, and just sort of your feelings. How did you manage through it?
Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh. It's such a big, robust story, but I'm going to try to break it down because I've been in therapy for 2.5 years, twice a week, and I run the podcast. Thanks. It's the trauma. So if anybody wants the long version of it, you are welcome to tune into that podcast. The short end of it was I will never forget being pregnant. And we watched this viral YouTube video with this child. And now I'm not going to remember if they were male to female or female to male. Can't remember. It was 7-8 years ago. And, but their name was Ryland, and their parents were sharing their journey about their child being trans. And I'll be honest, that was probably the very first time I had ever even been introduced to the term transgender. So I didn't have any friends that were transgender that I knew of. I just wasn't familiar with what it even meant or was.
Yeah.
So I was learning through YouTube, and I'm like bawling. And I remember thinking we didn't know the biological sex. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, they do these things like gender reveals. And I'm like, so that's not even like a thing, and having this conversation with my partner. And so, we went to like educate ourselves and different things. And there was a new TV show that had come out, and it was called like Transparent, I believe. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I remember, was like Jeffrey Tambor or something. I remember that show.
Yeah. And we like watched it together, and like I just remember like thinking we had conversations like, oh, we'll just let our children, let us know what their gender is, but we didn't know what that would look like. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm cisgender heterosexual woman, and I was married to a man, 6'4", Navy veteran. His name was Justin. Very in love, all the things. And one day Justin tried to commit suicide. That's the short end of it. Lots and lots of depression. I was married to this super hot guy that looked like Bradley Cooper. And I was like not understanding why he was an asshole that like thought, oh my God, I'm the hottest guy on the planet, because I was like, you are smoking hot. Right. And just didn't have a lot of self-confidence and those kinds of things. Lots of depression, lots of anxiety. And, 5 or 6 years into our marriage, I'm going to switch pronouns, but he tried to commit suicide, Justin. And from that came a conversation a couple of weeks later, really a note that he at the time handed to me that said, I have realized that I am transgender. And so the last 2.5 years have been navigating that, being cisgendered heterosexual woman married to a woman and who's transitioned fully. And then raising our kids who at the time were 3 and 4, in a very heteronormative, family. We had only thought about it in terms of like how we would approach parenting, but not in reverse. Like,
right.
So,
yeah.
How we would let our kids get to know us. So,
yeah.
Yeah, Jess.
No, it's an incredible story. And like, again, sort of hearing from my wife, like how you've navigated through it and how your like parenting style has maybe not shifted, because it sounds like you went into parenting with this open mind of like, if my kid identifies as something other than what they are, or, they are biologically, like, it's cool. And having those conversations so early because you had to, I mean, it to me, I think that just sets the stage for like even better kids. They're so aware, and I'm not going to say it's not a big deal. That's absolutely not the terms I'm looking for. You know what I mean, though? Like, your support of her, I'm sure, has been literally life-saving. And then your kids seeing your support of her, it's just going to make them these wonderful humans that understand that, gender is fluid, and gender is, it's not set in stone. Just because you're born with, a penis or a vagina does not mean that you love that thing. It just doesn't.
and that you're bound to it forever. Yeah.
Right.
So I say all the time, like we're living out unconditional love for them. Like we have the unique experience. They get to see it lived out, right? Like they know that when I say like mommy and KK are not married, I mean, we're married, but like not married together anymore, but we're together because we're a family, because no matter what, like we're very open with them. Like mommy is attracted to men. And so if I were to ever choose to be in a romantic relationship, it would be with a man. And so KK is a woman. So we're not in a romantic relationship, but we're family and we're friends. And I love her unconditionally, regardless of what she chooses for self-expression and self-identity and that kind of thing. So they hear that conversation over and over again. It's been 2.5 years, 3 years, almost 3 years. And Jess, they don't remember him.
And
So
like that's a whole other interesting thing. And I'm sure you would have had to deal with it very differently if they were their ages now, when
yes.
it came out, it would be really different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At the time I thought this is going to be the worst thing ever. And now their ages actually were an advantage. Like it was a blessing that they were so young so that we could kind of they hadn't learned about gender and constructs yet. So it was just this blank page for
Wait,
us
what do you
to
mean? Do you
create.
mean we teach people things like that?
Yeah,
I mean, we impose that on other people? That's so crazy to hear.
so crazy, right?
So crazy.
So we had this just, whiteboard to be able to just teach them a new narrative, and we're winging it, man. Like there's no book. Like the first thing I did was I'm a podcaster and I love podcasts. And so I got on the podcasting app and typed in like transgender, or my spouse is transgender. And nope, zero results. And then I typed it into Google and it was like zero results. And I was like, okay. So immediately I was aware there was no support system 3 years ago for me. And so there's still virtually no support system. I mean, I'm trying to build a support system for others by sharing my thoughts and feelings about this on a podcast. But it's really, from a parenting perspective, I mean, it's really kind of paving the way.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, you're doing a hell of a job. You'll build the support system. It's very cool. And I want to chat about your podcast and your book in just a second. But before we jump into that, you are sort of like this OG veteran doula in North Carolina. Like on average, how many births do you attend per week?
Oh, well, it's really funny because I have boundaries and you would think they get adhered to, but then they don't. So like my goal is to attend 1 to 2 per week.
Okay.
But you never know when, like, birth is just, it's just birth, it just, you never know like when it's going to go, how long it's going to last, any of these things. Right. And so you're on call 24/7. And so it looks like this. It looks like I work 0 days for 3 weeks. And then I work every day for 7 days straight, like can't even see. So, I mean, if I could map it out on my calendar, which I try really hard to do, it's 1 to 2 per week, but there are many weeks I don't work at all. And some weeks I am drowning.
It's a fine balance. It's interesting because I know, like, obviously, like Katie is a less tenured doula and she's had some really nice early success and she has all of these births coming up. And I see the, sort of variance in all of the different types of births that she's witnessed, just even so young in her career. And being a mom and having, produced a child physically, like she has her own opinions on birth. And like, I know you had a traumatic birth experience with one of your children. And as a doula, you've experienced like every type of birth out there. So, I mean, how do you manage that? Like, if you're part of a traumatic birth, like, is it very triggering for you? Like, are you able to sort of like church and state it? Like, how does that feel for you?
So it's a little bit of both, right? Like, sometimes my trauma gets triggered. Like my son's cerebral palsy is from a birth injury, from heart decelerations, from a double nuchal cord. So anytime I see prolonged heart decelerations, sometimes my brain jumps to the worst. Like I really hope that your child isn't about to have a stroke and have cerebral palsy also, right? But that's like my anxiety, my mom anxiety just speaking, into me, and I have to manage that in all the ways in which I manage anxiety. And I just, so Jess, I do have clinical anxiety. So for my whole entire life.
Join the club. Nicely medicated, happily medicated.
Paparazzi just came in, by the way. Good. That was Jagger who just took a picture of us.
Good. He can post it. We're very. So
I was like, and our photo was just taken.
Well, I was laughing before you were saying, you were like, oh, what if my kid runs in? I was like, oh, I don't give a shit if your kid runs in. I was like, it's a mom show. Like, my kid is only in the other room because our cleaning service is here and Katie has her. Yeah. That's the only reason why you're not hearing mama, please.
Let me in.
Yeah, exactly.
So a little bit of it just bleeds in, right? And then I have to like check in with the way in which I deal with all anxiety in all situations is like coming back into my body, making sure that I'm distinguishing like reality of what's in front of me versus my own birthing experience. But to say that it's never triggered, that just wouldn't be fair. It is, right? But I do attend so many wonderful, beautiful births that it's usually just going to work, right? And focusing on science and focusing on evidence and watching our innate bodily wisdom unfold, right? Like our bodies are so smart. And so I try to leave a lot of room in my doula practice for this innate wisdom of the birthing woman. Or the birthing parent. Now I was like, now that I screw up my pronouns all the time, but like the birthing parent, right? To let that process of nature unfold. And it typically unfolds pretty uneventfully, right? Yeah. Like typically it's like I have some contractions at some point, my water breaks. Like if you chill, we're just like at home, maybe you go to the birth center, maybe you can stay at home, maybe you go to the hospital, but like if people just chill, it usually just unfolds and doesn't end in a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
What I've noticed, most of my trauma is around all the interventions, right? Like it's traumatic with all this monitoring and all these beeping and fluorescent lights and having to transfer and, people not listening to you and not hearing the birthing person. Those are the things that are more traumatic to me on a daily basis of just like, I feel like I'm always fighting.
Yeah.
The word we use is advocacy, but
right. You're advocating for your clients.
Yeah. But it just kind of sometimes can feel like this just like big, massive system. And I think, am I ever going to win? Am I ever? And then if that mom that day walks away from her birth without medical trauma, win, right? Yeah. Like win.
Big win. Sure.
Yeah, we did it. You had asked about the big ones, right? Katie was starting her internship. Your wife, Katie, was starting her internship in January, and I had to push pause and push it back because one of my babies died. One of my doula babies died in the middle of the birth. And it was highly traumatic. I'm still processing it. I'll process it my whole life, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm still there with the parents. And it's really, really hard. And 48 hours after his name was Max, 48 hours after I held Max in my arms after he had passed away and we said goodbye, I had to go back to work. Another mom's water broke and I had to go back to work. And then I had to go back to work again. And
then you have to go home and be a mom.
Yeah, it was really hard.
It's really hard.
Really, really hard.
It's really hard. I feel like people think of doulas and they're like, oh, this is this nice, like spiritual, fluffy support animal that I have with me in the hospital. And like, it's so much more than that. Like, it's so important. Like, I literally don't know what we would have done without our doula during birth. I have no idea. For me, for Katie, for Lily, like having that person there, like you said, to advocate and to be that sounding board and that presence. It's just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It should be a no-brainer.
Yeah. And isn't it sad that everyone doesn't have access to a doula? I mean,
that's insurance. And I know you're very big on like, submit it to it. Like we need to change it. Like insurance should be covering doulas. Like it's insane. It's insane that it's not just standard operating procedure, because it really, really should be.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to work for a hospital, but like if the state Medicaid program wants to pay me, that'd be amazing. Thank you. Then I can
Yes. So she said it here first. Do it. Pay her.
Right.
Do it.
Exactly.
Do it. So let's talk about the book. Let's talk about the podcast, and then we'll start to wrap it up. I want to hear, what your goals are with it, where it's going, where people can find you, all of that good stuff. Because and I joke about what to expect when you're expecting. It's not really a joke though. Like, that book is scary as fuck. Like, you read that book and you're like, I'm never gonna be a good parent. I'm never going to be, like, everything about this is very terrifying. And like your book, because I've read parts of it before we met just to make sure I was like, oh yeah, I like her. Like, it's not scary. It's like consumable from like pregnancy to having the baby to after. And like, it's like emotionally soothing. So, I'd love to hear like what your goals are with it, what you're doing, podcast, all of your cool, birth story stuff.
I love it. Well, thank you for using the term emotionally soothing, because writing it was just that for me. So this is where my stories intersect.
Okay.
Jagger had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy. I was married. A couple of months later, my husband tries to commit suicide, lets me know that she is transgender, and our marriage is like, we don't know what it is, right? It's like, but right today, we're not together. And I was 100% financially dependent on this person.
Mm.
And that was a very scary place for me. I was like, oh my God, I went and got an MBA. I was the breadwinner for all these years. And then the second I decided to quit my job to take care of my kid with cerebral palsy, this happens to me. I was like, fuck.
That's the perfect reaction. I wish I could end the episode there. Fuck. Period.
Like, what do you do? Right. And I had 24 hours to decide what the rest of my life was going to look like, literally, because I had to fall asleep. I had to wake up, and I had to change diapers and get them to preschool in the morning. There was not a lot of time for grief. And I knew if I could get him to preschool, I had 3 hours where I could bawl my face off, go to therapy. And then I had to pick him up from preschool. And then I had to be a mom, And so while they were at preschool, I grieved, I wrote, I journaled, and I went to therapy. Those are on repeat.
Yeah.
And somehow I ended up, like, in that creative process, somehow I ended up with the Birth Story podcast, because I knew I wanted a free resource. Like, I knew part of my passion was, how do I serve all parents, even the ones who can't afford my book, even the ones who can't afford an online class, even the ones who can't afford a doula, right? Yeah. So the podcast was my gift. It's a creative outlet. It's really fun. And the And the platform is education through storytelling. I was so sick of people telling my clients what to do and how to do it that I thought there has to be a different way. And the different way for me too, the parallel was, people were trying to come in and tell me how I was supposed to respond to my spouse being transgender. And I'm like, get out of here. Like, you have no idea. I have no idea. But what was helpful for me was podcasts where I listened to other people's trauma and how they navigated it. So storytelling, again, I was educating myself through storytelling. And that was really how I practiced as a doula. So it all came together over the last 2.5 years in the book, Birth Story Pregnancy Guidebook and Journal, and then the Birth Story podcast. And it's all education through storytelling. So it's all birth story based. But then as soon as you're like, what did she just say? I either pause the podcast and I educate you, or in the book, they are pop outs. So I think there's over 100 pop outs of key terms like when to go to the hospital, what is a mucus plug, how do you know if your water's broken, how do you know if you're in labor? These are all pop outs to these beautiful birth stories. So 42 weeks for hopefully 42 weeks of pregnancy or less, right? Some of us gestate a little bit longer, and it's meant to be read week by week. So there's postcards from the womb, meaning each week you get a postcard from your baby saying, this is what's going on inside of me. And I do use heteronormative language, and I have a disclosure in the front of the book about that, but it's like, dear mom, blah, 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 blah. This is what's going on with me and my development. Then there's a birth story with all the podcasts. I cannot talk, Jess, with all the podcasts, with all the pop outs.
Pop outs, highcast, same shit.
They're similar. With all the pop outs. And then there's a journaling prompt each week with a huge, like, it's a big book. So then there's a whole space to write and journal, because I want it to be a keepsake and a memory saver of your whole pregnancy and all the, we talk about shit moms don't say, shit things mom don't remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, please. Oh my God.
Will not remember any of it. So put it in the journal. And then there's birth affirmations to practice throughout too. So, yeah, this was emotionally therapeutic for me to write it and be part of it. And then I'm just so proud of it. And I have no idea how to make a self-published author at Target or Costco so that the whole world could have access to this book. But I'm going to figure it out.
You're going to figure it out. And we're going to obviously tag Target and Costco and Walmart and Barnes and Nobles and all the booksellers out there, because what you've put together, it's really special. It's not just, you don't just read it, walk away from it and go, oh, parenting book. Like, it's actionable. It's tangible. It's very consumable. It's good. I'm a little bit of a Neanderthal when it comes to birth things, which is very funny because of who I'm married to. And anytime Katie was like, well, read this book, I was like, fuck no. I just don't like stuff like that. And it reads really, really differently from other quote unquote parenting books, because it's really a pregnancy and birth book. And it's an experience. I can't talk, an experience book. It's cool. Congratulations. And so right now, it's not in Target, it's not in Costco, not yet. Where can people buy it?
Well, you can buy it on Amazon.
Okay.
That's like the number one way people do buy it, but I prefer you buy it directly from me at birthstory.com. That just means I make money on it, because
she should make money on it because she wrote it. So you should get paid for your work.
Yeah. Amazon, they make money on it. But if you buy it directly from me at birthstory.com, and if you use code Jess, I'll give you 50% off and free shipping. So birthstory.com, and then use code Jess, and then you'll get 50% off the book, and then I'll ship it to you for free. Also, that would be amazing. And then if you're listening to a podcast, you're probably an Audible kind of person. And so I have more sales on Audible than anything else.
Oh, cool.
And Audible actually does pay me really well. And so I appreciate that from Audible. So you just have to type in birth story pregnancy guidebook, or it'll probably pop up after that.
Awesome. And this will obviously all be tagged out so everyone can find it and use it very, very easily. Consider buying it. It's really, really cool. And, I don't bullshit a lot on this show. I don't really have moms on who even if they're like a cool name, there was somebody we were talking about the other day that was like a cool name, and I was like, I think they're kind of a bitch. I won't do it. So I'm telling you, this is worth the buy. Invest in it. Invest in Heidi. Invest in what she's doing. It's really, really cool. Cool. Great.
Yeah. Thanks.
So of course, let's start to wrap up. Because believe it or not, Heidi has a tight schedule. Can you imagine? One of the best doulas in North Carolina has a tight schedule. So we got to go. So let's start to wrap it up. I have 2 final questions for you.
Okay.
So the first being, your kids are 5 and 7. And I like this question because there's so many varying ages of kids of moms that come on the show. What is one thing or a product you can't live without as a parent?
Oh, I don't even have to think about it. It is a book called, and we may have to look it up to properly tag it, Jess, but it's called Who Am I?
Okay.
It might not be that exact title, but it's something like that.
Something like that. Cool.
I think it's Who Am I? Right.
Okay.
And this is the book that saved our family. It is a book that starts with, hey kid, when you were born, your parents looked at your biological sex and they made a guess about your gender.
Ooh.
And that's what we've done through hundreds of years. Here's why your gender and your biological sex don't always match up. And she goes on, and like one of the pages is a closet, and it says, "Dear kid, show me which clothes you like in this closet. That's
Oh
your gender
man.
expression." And then the next closet is a closet of toys. And it's like, share with me what toys you like. And it goes on, and it describes the spectrum of gender. And it doesn't really dabble in sexuality, but like just the
Yeah.
gender spectrum, and how, we do different pronouns, and some people are non-binary, and there's two spirits. I mean, it is the most wonderful book for parenting. In my dream world, every parent would have it and would start having this conversation with their 3-year-old.
Oh, we're gonna buy it. That's awesome. That's very cool. Okay, awesome. All right, final question. And this is like always a little bit of a hard one, but I also think it should be an easy one. So we'll see.
Okay.
What is something you know now that you wish you knew before becoming a mom?
Oh my goodness. Like everything? Is that like a thing?
That's a fair answer. Yeah.
Postpartum anxiety.
Okay.
I was a doula. I was, very educated on postpartum anxiety and the signs. And I wish someone would have explained to me what it felt like to have postpartum anxiety. I knew I was at high risk because I had generalized anxiety.
Yeah.
Right. But I really wish that someone had explained to me what it felt like to have postpartum anxiety and when to get help.
Yeah.
Because I just waited way too long. So I'm going to finish this, Jess, by explaining what postpartum anxiety looked like.
Please.
For me.
Yeah, please do.
It is a constant reel of negative fear-based thinking that's pretty irrational. And it extends, we call it postpartum, but it can extend all the way into parenthood forever. Glennon Doyle just launched her new podcast, and she talked about the anxiety that she felt when her 18-year-old left a note on the counter, Chase, about going for a bike ride. So I highly recommend listening to that episode because it will hit home for many. But the way that it looked like for me is every time I tried to get in the shower, which is very hard when you're a new mom.
Sure. Yeah.
To take a shower. The only thing that should have been going on in that shower, maybe, was like shaving my legs, soap, having some thinking time, right? And instead, what it looked like for me is I would hear a noise, and then I would think, oh no. And I'm going to reverse to Justin because it was Justin at the time.
Sure.
Sorry. But I would be like, oh no, my partner has fallen on my child. They fell down the stairs. That's what that noise was. Everyone's dead. Right? It always ended in death, right? The reason I knew it was a problem is because I would actually get out of the shower to find out like the dog knocked over a picture frame or something.
Yeah.
If my partner was like, hey, I'm going to take the baby to the grocery store to give you a break, my first thought was like, oh, awesome. And the second that door closed, it was like, they're getting in a car accident right now. My intuition is telling me I know something is going to go wrong. And then I was calling them incessantly, like, come home. I don't need a break. Get back here.
Yeah.
The difference between anxiety and like postpartum anxiety and like being normal or a problem, right? Like normal is like, is my baby breathing? Like, I'm like, maybe I should roll him over. Like, like kind of normal things, right? That you should be, or mammals, we should be cautious, right? What's not normal is taking action on irrational thinking, right? Like if I had just thought like, I wonder what that noise was. And then I had this constant reel of negative thinking, but the battle inside me was able to say, Heidi, you're ridiculous. Like keep watching.
Nothing. Yeah.
Probably could have lived through that. But when I knew that I needed to seek help is when I was getting out of the shower and stopping people from leaving the house and like trying to interfere with regular life happening because I was so afraid that like everyone was just going to die and then I wouldn't be able to handle that. And so, my body wouldn't allow life to just happen. So,
well, and your intuition was off, and like that's sort of all we have, like that's what your entire guide in life is, right? And like there's probably a few people watching this that are like, good for her, pretending that she believes that. But like it's true. If you can hear your intuition in that situation, it was off. It's telling you something's wrong and nothing was wrong.
Right. Exactly. So if I could go back, I really wish I would have spent some time talking to my doctor, talking to my therapist, understanding how generalized anxiety could really transition into postpartum anxiety. Now what I just call parenthood anxiety,
Right.
like it's a real thing. There are wonderful strategies to get it to go away. But if no one has explained to you what it feels like, then hopefully my little story helps you.
I'm sure it will. Well, thank you so much for being here. Where can people follow you on social media?
On Instagram at Birth Story Podcast. Very simple.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Go on with your day. It has been an absolute treat talking to you. And thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next week.